And she began thinking over all the children she knew that were of the same age as herself to see if she could have been changed for any of them. "I'm sure I'm not Ada," she said, "for her hair goes in such long ringlets and mine doesn't go in ringlets at all. And I'm sure I can't be Mabel, for I know all sorts of things, and she knows such a very little. Besides, and and oh dear, how puzzling it all is. I'll try to see if I know all the things I used to know. Let me see. 4 times 5 is 12, and 4 times 6 is 13, and 4 times 7 is, oh dear, I shall never get to 20 at that rate. However, the multiplication table doesn't signify. Let's try geography. London is the capital of Paris, and Paris is the capital of Rome. And Rome, no, that's all wrong, I'm certain. I must have changed for Mabel. I'll try and say, how doth the little, and she crossed her hands on her lap, as if she were saying lessons, and began to repeat it to herself, but her voice sounded hoarse and strange, and the words did not come out the same as they used to do. How doth the little crocodile improve his shining tail, and pour the waters of the Nile on every golden scale? How cheerfully he seems to grin, how neatly spread his claws, and welcome little fishes in with gently smiling jaws. "I'm sure those are not the right words," said poor Alice, and her eyes filled up with tears again, and she went on. "I must be Mabel after all, and I shall have to go and live in that poky little house, and have next to no toys to play with, and oh, ever so many lessons to learn. No, I've made up my mind about it. If I'm Mabel, I'll stay down here. It'll be no use putting their heads down and saying, 'Come up again, dear.' I shall only look up and say, 'Who am I then?' Tell me that first, and then, if I like being that person, I'll come up. If not, I'll stay down here till I'm somebody else." "But oh dear," cried Alice with a sudden burst of tears, "I wish they do wish they would put their heads down. I'm so very tired of being alone down here." As she said this, she looked down at her hands, and was surprised to see that she had one of the rabbit's little white kid gloves while she was talking. "How can I have done that?" she thought. "I must be growing small again." She got up and went to the table to measure herself by it, and found that, as nearly as she could guess, she was now about 2 feet high, and was going on shrinking rapidly. She soon found out that the cause of this was the fan she was holding, and she dropped it hastily, just in time to avoid shrinking away altogether. "That was a narrow escape," said Alice, a good deal frightened at the sudden change, but very glad to find herself still in existence. "And now for the garden." And she ran with all speed back to the little door, but alas, the little door was shut again, and the little golden key was lying on the glass table as before. "And things are worse than ever," thought the poor child, "for I never was so small as this before, never, and I declare it's too bad that it is." As she said these words, her foot slipped, and in another moment, splash, she was up to her chin in salt water. Her first idea was that she had somehow fallen into the sea, and that in that case I can go back by railway, she said to herself. Alice had been to the seaside once in her life, and had come to the great conclusion that whenever you go to on the English coast, you'll find a number of bathing machines in the sea, some children digging in the sand with wooden spades, then a row of lodging houses, and behind them a railway station. However, soon she made out that she was in a pool of tears which she had wept when she was 9 feet high. "I wish I hadn't cried so much," said Alice, as she swam about, trying to find her way out. "I shall be punished for it now, I suppose, by being drowned in my own tears. That will be a queer thing, to be sure. However, everything is queer today." Just then she heard something splashing about in the pool a little way off. She swam nearer to make out what it was. At first she thought it must be a walrus or hippopotamus. But then she remembered how small she was now, and she soon made out that it was only a mouse that had slipped in like herself. Would it be of any use now, thought Alice, to speak to this mouse? Everything is so out of the way down here that I should think very likely it can talk. At any rate, there's no harm in trying. So she began, "Oh, Mouse, do you know the way out of this pool? I am very tired of swimming about here, oh, Mouse." Alice thought this must be the right way of speaking to a mouse. She had never done such a thing before, but she remembered having seen in her brother's Latin grammar a mouse of a mouse to a mouse, oh mouse. The mouse looked at her rather inquisitively, seemed to her to wink with one of its little eyes, but it said nothing. Perhaps it doesn't understand English, thought Alice. I dare say it's a French mouse. Come over with the William the Conqueror, for with all her knowledge of history, Alice had no very clear notion how long ago anything had happened. So she began again, "Où est ma chara?" which is the first sentence in her French lesson book. The mouse gave a sudden leap out of the water and seemed to quiver all over with fright. "Oh, I beg your pardon," cried Alice hastily, afraid that she'd hurt the poor animal's feelings. "I quite forgot you didn't like cats." "Not like cats," cried the mouse in a shrill, passionate voice. "Would you like cats if you were me?" "Well, perhaps not," said Alice in a soothing tone. "Don't be angry about it, and yet I wish I could show you our cat Dinah. I think you'd take a fancy to cats if you could only see her. She is such a dear, quiet thing," Alice went on, half to herself, as she swam lazily about in the pool. "And she sits purring so nicely by the fire, licking her paws and washing her face. And she is such a nice soft thing to nurse, and she's just such a capital one for catching mice." "Oh, I beg your pardon," cried Alice again, for this time the mouse was bristling all over, and she felt certain it must really be offended. "We won't talk about her any more, if you would rather not." "Indeed," cried the mouse, who was trembling down to the end of this tale, "as if we would talk on such a subject. Our family always hated cats, nasty, low, vulgar things. Don't let me hear that name again." "I won't indeed," said Alice, in a great hurry to change the subject of conversation. "Are you fond of dogs?" The mouse did not answer, so Alice went on eagerly. "There is such a nice little dog near our house. I should like to show you. A little bright-eyed terrier, you know, with such long curly brown hair. And it'll fetch things when you throw them, and it'll sit up and beg for its dinner, and all sorts of things. I can't remember half of them. And it belongs to the farmer, you know, and he says it's so useful. It's worth £100. He says it kills all the rats, and oh dear," cried Alice in a sorrowful tone, "I'm afraid I've offended it again." For the mouse was swimming away from her as hard as it could, and making quite a commotion in the pool as it went. So she softly called after it, "Dear mouse, dear, do you come back again? And we won't talk about cats or dogs either, if you don't like them." When the mouse heard this, it turned around and swam slowly back to her. Its face was quite pale with passion, Alice thought, and it said in a low, trembling voice, "Let us get to the shore, and then I'll tell you my history, and you'll understand why it is I hate cats and dogs." It was high time to go, for the pool was getting quite crowded with the birds and animals that had fallen into it. There were a duck and a dodo, a lory, and an eaglet, and several other curious creatures. Alice led the way, and the whole party swam to shore.